Hello, everybody.
Well,
Welcome back. Part 5, the Pandemic Survival Guide. My two business partners have joined me. Usually Nicole McDonough, who I'm sure you know from Harvey, does a simple introduction, but I think she got sidetracked, so I'm just jumping in. You guys have been here on time, so let's go and do the same. So this is part 5. You know, we've been talking about all the things leading up, but we're beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. So Ed and Paul have done some neat research, because what does the next 6 to 12 months look like? So some very cool stuff. Ed, let me introduce you here, and let's see where this can go.
all right. Well, sounds good. I think you guys all, after 5 weeks of this, should probably know who we all are. But in case you want to put a name to the voice, there's all of our information. We've also included our phone numbers and our email addresses. And please, if you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. We're happy to help in any way we can. We just talked to one of our clients this morning that just got their EIDL and PPP loan, over $500,000 that they otherwise would not have gotten without all of our advice and support and assistance. So anyway, if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
So the question I have for you, Ed, is this light at the end of the tunnel, or a train coming the other way?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, let's look at the light at the end of the tunnel. Finally, as you know, every webinar we've shown you this chart, and for the very first time now, we actually have less restrictions than we had before. So the worst it was on April 9th, and then basically for the last 3 weeks, nothing has changed. But as of this week, we had 2 states drop off of the statewide order for construction. So construction is now allowed again in Washington, and dang it, I don't know my state, my New England.
I was trying to figure it out too, and I got sidetracked. But yeah, there's a second state in there too.
I think it's New Hampshire. I think that one's New Hampshire. The one next to it is Vermont. But trying to remember my U.S. geography. In any case, the good news is that the red states are starting to disappear. That's not a political statement. That's just a construction statement. Hopefully soon the green states will start to turn into gray states. I think if you are in one of the 7 states that are gray, I think that you are in very good shape. I don't think that the restrictions are ever going to touch you. So you are very fortunate if you are in, let's see, Utah, Colorado. Really? There's no restrictions.
No, not Colorado.
In Colorado,
that's just above. Wyoming, Nevada, Nebraska, and then North and South Dakota, and then Arkansas down there at the lower right.
You must have done well in geography when you were in high school, right?
Just don't ask me to name the capitals.
Okay, we're fine.
All right. Well, as David said, you know, there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. The restrictions are starting to get lifted, and so that begs the question: what happens next? What does the next year look like? And so I've spent the last week or so just reading as many articles as I can. It's all still somewhat conjecture. No one really knows for sure what's going to happen, because no one really knows what's going to happen once we relax these restrictions and how the coronavirus is going to act. But I did find some information that I want to share with you, because I think that this is what I'm finding as a general consensus. The first thing is that we're never going to go back to the way things were before. Society and business have been changed permanently. COVID-19 has changed the way that we will approach things, particularly in relation to health.
I think a good example is after 9/11, security has never been the same, right? And it's never going back to pre-9/11. So airports, the security, that's never going to go away. So just like that affected things permanently, it's the same kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and like you've said, Paul, it's kind of like, you know, you remember the days when you could get on a plane without going through a metal detector. Well, you know, now you'll remember the days before you could get on a plane without having to breathe into a tube or have your
Get your temperature checked.
Temperature checked, right?
Right.
Or when you could shake hands.
Another thing.
Remember those days?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, remember the days you could shake hands? Yeah. Another thing is that it's quite clear while we got into this very quickly, we got into this in a matter of what seems like days, but was probably weeks. We are not going to get out of it nearly as quickly. And it is going to take months, if not years, before all of the restrictions are dropped and things get back to some semblance of normal. So the various states have started to put together phases. This is one of the phases that the federal government outlined last week as well, kind of give you an idea of which businesses will be affected in each phase. So the first phase is that they're going to open up retail. They're going to open up restaurants, but with very limited seating and no bars, and allow groups of under 10 people, which my understanding is also includes businesses. So if you have a business with less than
where are
10
you going to
people,
meet new friends?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's tough. But if you have an office with less than 10 people, my understanding is that once phase 1 hits, you can then reopen your office. Phase 2 is schools and groups of 50 or more people. Now, it's unfortunate that they're putting schools into phase 2 because, as I'm sure all of you understand, one of the biggest impacts, and we see this with most of our clients, is not so much on the restrictions on the business, but by not having schools open and daycares closed, it puts just an incredible amount of stress on any employees and or business owners that have children that are home with them. So anyway, that's what happens in phase 2. Then phase 3, and that's also up to 50 people. So then if you have a business with up to 50 people, you can have your full company there at your office. Phase 3 is unrestricted staffing of all workers up to 250 people. But again, that's also restricted to any assemblies of people over 250. So that means that you still won't be seeing anything.
Wait. Where's phase 4? Like rock concerts and
right.
Coachella and all. Where's all that?
It's done, Paul. So I literally was on the phone with somebody from the remodeling show. And they are canceling the JLC Live show in August. They're going to be canceling the JLC Live show in Portland. They're hoping to host the remodeling show in November. So the bigger events, they're really under the microscope. Will the remodeling show happen? Time will tell.
So the IBS may not happen this year.
Well, it's next February, but if you're talking about a gathering of 100,000 people,
1,000 people, yep.
How does it work?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, no, and what they said in this article I read is that it may not be until there's a vaccine. And not only a vaccine, but a vaccine that can be widely distributed to hundreds of millions of people. So, they're saying it's, 12 months to get the vaccine, but it could be another 6 months beyond that before they have enough doses and can roll it out to enough people. So, yeah, that is unfortunate. So another thing that I noticed here,
this aside, at Penn State, where he said that's going to affect his market, right? Because if you're in a market like where the colleges are important and the football games are big, or I have a house in Palm Springs and whatever, Coachella was big, you have to rethink all that stuff because that's a new world.
Right.
Yes, exactly right. College towns like our client yesterday in State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is, he said, look, we only have 50,000 people in our town and we have a stadium that seats 100,000. So, half of our business every year from restaurants and hotels and everything else is based on those 8 or 10 college football games that we have every fall. So that's going to be a big impact. So another thing that I've seen is that I think we're going to see lower efficiencies overall in production and in society. And we're just going to have to kind of resign ourselves to that. For example, Ford and GM, they're realizing that they can't have as many workers on the production line once they open back up. So it's just going to take them longer to put out a car. Restaurants are not going to be able to have their tables spaced as closely together. So They're not going to be able to turn over as much business in a night as they could in the past. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to start to see. And I think as a result of that, unlike other recessions or other economic challenges where we've seen a drop in prices, I don't think we're going to necessarily see that now, because it's going to take longer to produce these goods. And as a result, they probably will be at a higher cost. All right, so let's go beyond that. And now let's look at the impacts of the coronavirus on residential construction in particular in that industry. The first thing is that where there's going to be added regulations and procedures, right? So in regards to workspace and hygiene, and I think while we're experiencing them right now, as Paul has said, they're like seatbelts. You know, once they get implemented, they're never going away. So some of these things about hourly hand washing required, not sharing tools, I think some of those are just going to become part of the OSHA procedures that everyone is going to have to follow going forward. 5 people maximum on a single site may go away. I just saw it here in San Diego yesterday. There's a whole new set of construction regulations. One of them is that workers are not allowed to carpool to the job site. So now, instead of having 2 or 3 cars show up with 3 or 4 workers in each car, we're not going to have a dozen cars that we've got to find a place to park at the curb because everyone has to come in their own car. So the second thing is longer production times. Just like I said, what restaurants and car factories are seeing, we're going to see the same thing, right? Because we can have less crews on a job site at a time, it's just going to take longer to be able to get those jobs completed. We're also going to see supply chain delays and disruptions over the next 12 plus months. I think we're going to have problems with getting materials from other countries or even from within the US. And so it's important that you as a builder start to bake these longer lead times into your production schedules, so that when you go and present your schedules, construction schedules to your clients, add some extra time in there, not only for supply chain disruptions and longer periods of time to get materials, but also recognizing that it could take longer for your crews to get their work done as well. And God forbid, who knows, if we have another outbreak again in the fall, this whole thing could start all over again. So make sure that you put some added cushion into your construction schedules. And then the last area that I think we're going to see the impact long-term in the construction industry is this reduced face-to-face interactions. We've obviously seen that considerably over this whole shelter-in-place period of time, but I think that we're going to see that going forward. You know, staff is going to work less time from the office and more time from home. As we start to come on board, there's going to be these staggering of hours and trying to reduce the number of people in the office. And I think for some workers, and in some cases, some people, if they have the right personality, they find out that they're pretty good at working from home. Some aren't, and we're going to talk about that in a later slide as well, a way that you can actually test for that. And also, I think that our clients now are much more receptive of being able to see things online. They're not going to necessarily want to feel like they have to show up at your office to have a face-to-face meeting. I'm using my 83-year-old parents as an example. I could have never gotten them on a Zoom call or a FaceTime call before this. Right. But now my dad's doing his FaceTime calls and Zoom call Kiwanis meetings all the time.
Right. And one thing we've seen is the acceptance of selections. I think we're so used to buying stuff on Amazon now that we're okay with buying stuff without looking at a couple reviews and not actually having to touch and feel it. And so what will happen is your selections, they're going to choose your tile, choose your appliances, choose that kind of stuff, and much more done online, which is a lot easier anyway, because there's a general acceptance of that. And so when you're looking at selections, you can have a Zoom meeting and do your selections. You don't have to run them all around town to all the showrooms anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then the last thing is, and we mentioned this earlier, but, previous recessions have affected prices, but this recession is going to have a bigger impact on production. So that's going to be a unique situation for us. Okay, so how do we incorporate these into best practices going forward? Well, we've developed what we call our post-pandemic best practices for the residential construction industry. And we've organized these in 4 or 5 different categories. So the first thing is, before we get into those categories, it's important for you to realize that you have to change or you're going to become extinct. A few webinars back, Paul walked you through the Who Moved My Cheese book. And if you can recall, one of those slides specifically said, if you don't change, you're going to become extinct. Paul, you're also reading this book right now, right?
Yeah. It's talking about a reset, that, you know, security is going to be a big issue, and the fact that we all need passwords. So that's going to eventually bring the downfall to companies like Google, who basically trade your information for services, like what you buy and how you buy it and where you buy it, and they'll give you free search. So that's going to change. There's a lot of things that are going to change in the future. Obviously, we're going to be looking at more and more virtual everything. So go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So, and I think it's also important to realize that these technology changes were coming gradually over time. And what this pandemic has done is it's sped everything up. And so changes that may have taken a couple, 2 or 3 years to happen now have happened in a matter of months. And you really have to get on board with this. We, as you know, have told you time and time again about this digital transformation of the construction industry. And it's here. You need to get on board.
Right.
Go ahead, Paul.
An example would be that we have a client that was listening to us. Like, we told him we hired him a person because nobody spoke very good English there. We changed that. And we did some things really quickly. That person was able to apply for loans, do a lot of things really fast. So what happened, some people right now are sitting in a position that didn't do this, that are worried about surviving. This person reacted quickly, like we're talking about. They have $1 million in cash, and they're ready to move forward and do really well over the next 6 months. So if you can act quickly, there's a lot of opportunity. If you don't, you might be dead as a business.
Yeah. All right, so let's move to the first category of post-pandemic best practices, and that's marketing. All right, so the first thing that we're seeing is what we're calling digital differentiation. What's going to set the builders from here going forward, the successful builders, apart from their competition, is how well they adopt this new technology. So it's time to get on board. It starts with your website, right? Your website now needs to be dynamic, engaging, interactive. You know, it used to be you could put a website together and leave it there for 2 or 3 years and you'd be fine. And that's just not the case anymore. With the changes that have happened, starting with the dynamically sized websites that happened as everyone got onto mobile devices. Now, if you get onto a website and it doesn't have some kind of engaging video or motion, forget it, you're lost. So invest the time and the money to update your website, because that's the first thing. And it really does need to be dynamic, engaging, and interactive. The next thing, and we've said this before, is adopt a cloud-based construction project management system. Before, it was more of an option. Now, in today's world of distancing and remote control, you need to have a system. Lots of great ones out there: Co-Construct, Buildertrend, Procore, UDA Construction Online. Get on, do a demo, and get onto a system if you're not already on there. Video conferencing, messaging, screen share, and chat. Our very first webinar, we went over several different technologies, including Zoom and Loom and Glide. Those are all still very, very good technologies. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about that here in a minute. Remote viewing and design tools. 360 cameras are really, really great. Paul, we just heard of one yesterday, another version of a 360 camera, which is actually more designed towards realtors, but it gives you more control and dynamics than a 360 camera, but it also doesn't cost what it costs for a Matterport. So anyway,
we both ordered one because they were so cheap, right?
Yeah,
right,
and
exactly.
The point you're making here, Ed, is that digital transformation, this is simple differentiation. The best companies, as they adopt this technology, begin interacting with both potential and present clients. Why wouldn't people get on board? Because they see this advantage, they see the professionalism. it really is differentiating yourself from the competition so that suddenly you stand out. Now, like asking contractors, if people see what you're doing and how you're doing it, will they pay a little more for that advantage? What would be your answer, Ed?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in this time right now where things are going to be more and more competitive, that's absolutely the case. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to just real quickly, since I could pull it up and we're talking about it, I just want to show you, this is the technology. So it's called Open Frame. And it's basically a 360-degree camera that you attach to your iPhone. It only works on the iPhone, but you can go in and shoot a picture.
Well, it works on an Android too, just so you know.
Oh, it does? Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't realize.
You can click iPhone or Android. I ordered one. Yeah, works either way.
Wow, great. So again, it gives you kind of the same look and feel as a Matterport. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow you to walk through the space or to zoom up or zoom back. So it's not quite as good as a Matterport. But anyway, so that's.
But it doesn't take a VR viewer either. You're using the phone, so there's no VR viewer.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right. But at the same time, it's $250 a year versus $3,600 for the camera and $65 a month. So it's very affordable for everybody.
Exactly. So let me show you one other thing, which is this is a virtual design technology that one of our clients, Lewis Builders, is using. And they're incorporating 3 different tools. They're using Matterport for the 3D walkthroughs. And actually, you can get a level of detail that you can literally take takeoffs and measurements for that space. And then once they have all of those drawings and measurements, then they go into Chief Architect, they draw their 3D model of the plans, and then they incorporate in Twin Motion, which is an animation of a 3D model. So let me I'm gonna just play for you, if I can, just quickly play for you this little 2-minute video and let you watch how this process works.
And think about it, if you were a consumer and you're now trying to find your contractor on the internet as opposed to asking a friend, because you can't go visit the friend because you can't talk to her anymore. Kidding. So you're gonna look on the internet, and who are you gonna choose? Are you gonna use someone like this because they go, wow, this looks like Amazon versus 2 guys in a truck, or somebody else? So it becomes huge in marketing, and that's just getting more prevalent every day.
Right. So let me just stop for a second. So this is Chief Architect. So what they've done is they've drawn their 2-dimensional plans, and as you're drawing those plans in Chief Architect simultaneously is creating this 3D rendering. So then they take all of those plans and then they go to their Matterport software and they go into, say, for example, here in the laundry room, they want to get certain dimensions in the laundry room. Well, they can pull up their footage from Matterport and look at that, actually get ceiling heights, get the depth of cabinets, width of doorways, literally make these measurements so that then they can go back to Chief Architect and change and modify their drawings and dimensions within Chief Architect based on the measurements that they're able to get from their Matterport. So all of that without having to make another trip out to the client's house. And then once they get all the drawings together on Chief Architect, then they pull them into this Twin Motion software, and Twin Motion then makes it realistic, right? So it pulls in the 3D drawing from Chief Architect, and now it's adding the sun and the sky and trees that are waving in the breeze. And it even allows you, look at that, you can actually even see at various times of the day how the sunlight is going to react in the rooms and in the spaces. So it's an incredibly realistic, look at the pool there, the waves are moving. So it's incredibly realistic adaptation and can be really powerful to help your clients to be able to understand what their process is going to look like, what their project is going to look like. So, all right. So let me go back to the slideshow here, and we can move on. All right. So let's move on now to the next post-pandemic practices, which is in operations. we're realizing that it's becoming much more common to outsource professional services, things like accounting, legal, recruiting, consulting. You know, it's no longer necessary to keep those things there at your local office or even in the city that your business is located in.
Well, as an example, we're recruiting for 25 companies all over the United States, and our home office is in Hawaii. So,
right,
you know, and it works just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Also, that the same thing happens with online financial transactions. You know, checks are quickly becoming obsolete, and you've got to be able, in your business, you should be able to accept client payments online. You should be able to make electronic payments to your vendors and your suppliers, and basically be able to do all of that. And as far as accepting clients' payments online and making payments, many of the best cloud-based project management systems, including Buildertrend and Co-Construct, have those abilities built into their software.
Right. An example would be, my wife's from Finland, so we spend the summers in Finland. Finland doesn't use checks. If you go to a bank with a check, you can't cash it. So checks are gone. History, you can't use a check. I made the mistake, and it was a problem because I couldn't find any money because I said, I have a check. They go, what is one of those? We don't use that anymore. So that's coming this way. And the idea of the checks in the mail or whatever, 5 years from now, checks are going to be gone. So plan for it.
Right. And another thing too, right now with the pandemic, I was just, again, my 80-year-old parents were getting ready to mail a check, and I taught them how to pay it online. And he said, well, but I just feel better with a check. I said, two things, Dad. First off, you put a check in an envelope, who knows where it's going to end up? It's much less secure that way. And secondly, think about what's going to happen when that check shows up in someone's office right now. There's not even anyone to open that and process that check. So that check could end up sitting on someone's desk for a couple, 2 or 3 weeks until that office opens up again. So it's much more secure, and it's much, much quicker to be able to send your payments electronic and online rather than writing a check. Okay, so from operations, let's move on to staffing. Post-pandemic best practices in staffing. Again, start to realize that you need to recruit for your remote workforce. Recognize that there's a very good chance that your workforce is going to have to be able to work remotely. So are they capable of that? Do they have the ability? Do they have the home situation to allow them to do that? And secondly, do they have the personality type and the temperament to be able to handle that? Paul, why don't you tell them about our recruiting service and what we've been able to do?
Well, we recruit for about 25 companies, and they're all construction companies, so we have a sense of how this works. And what's happened is now you can test for everything these days, whether they're going to work out, their technical skills, and you can also test whether they work well at home, because you have several people that are clients that have taken the, you know, they said nobody came to work. What happened was the project manager or the office administrator started working from home. Well, some people succeeded and some people totally failed. They were great when they were in the office. You put them at home and they tank. So you can't count on just because somebody works hard in your office. It's a different skill set to work at home. Some people will work well under supervision and some people don't. Got an architect and you had an awesome person when they were in the office. They sent them home, nothing. So you've got it. We can test for that. You have to make sure that works. So as you're building your new workforce, make sure that there are people that can work at home and will work at home, because it takes an entirely different personality set to get somebody who's going to be productive at home versus productive when you're in the office with them.
Right. So also there's this concept of geofencing. Some people say, well, again, how do I know whether my employees are where they say they're going to be? Or how do I know my crew is there on the work job if I can't have my superintendent there because we're limited in the numbers we can keep? Again, there's a geofencing technology that allows you and will notify you if your employees aren't within the certain boundaries that you've established them to be in. So, and again, those are features that are included in the cloud-based construction management systems like Co-Construct and Buildertrend. All right, post-pandemic best practices with purchasing and selections. Paul brought up some of this before. But really, and I know many of you are going to feel like this is not good news, but we really feel that online selections are here to stay. And you're still going to have to go to the showroom for some of your selections, but we really see the popularity of showrooms decreasing. People are going to want to limit their number of trips outside, their exposures. They're realizing now that on the internet they can really see and get to take a look at a lot of things online, and they're becoming more comfortable with those online selections. I was telling Paul the other day, I said, but it's not like a toaster. You can go online and select a toaster and you'll see 3 different toasters. But I do think that tile is becoming the way that toasters are. And in other words, 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think hardly anyone would feel comfortable selecting tile online. But now we don't have a choice in many cases. And I think that people are realizing the renderings and the photos that are available online are much more realistic, and they're doing a better job of being able to convey those materials.
Well, and Amazon, for better or worse, is retraining us all to be okay with buying stuff online. Wait till you look at it online and you look at a couple of things to figure it out. I was also reading a book, the book I mentioned earlier, and it says when you go to select something, in the old days, you'd go to Google and look up toasters, or go to Google and look up refrigerators. Now that's changed. Only 20% of the people, 25% of the people go to Google to look up stuff that they're considering buying and compare. Now, 55 or 60% go to Amazon. And so, okay, I'm looking for a refrigerator, and they put refrigerators in Amazon. I look at 10 refrigerators and the price and the reviews. So things are changing in that direction. So if somebody's going to buy a tile or a countertop or whatever, they're going to be going to Amazon or equivalent of that and looking at countertops or looking at refrigerators and looking at various kinds of things. And they won't need to touch it and feel it anymore because we've been retrained to accept that. And this has just kicked out all into high gear with the pandemic.
Well, and we almost look at it generationally, Paul. So we think in our age group, I want to see it. My son doesn't need to see it. I mean, he lives in New York City. I think, outfitted his entire apartment. Yes, Amazon. He didn't need to see it.
Well, an example, we just furnished our entire house in Finland yesterday without seeing anything. And it's all going to be delivered by the time we get there. And that's another country halfway across the world. Wow. Because we figured, we just know we look at online, it looks good, look at the reviews, we're good. And we ordered the entire house full of furniture and have never seen it.
Wow. Yeah. I think another thing that's retraining us as well, and this is where this picture shows up as well, is that you're not getting the level of service that you used to get in real stores anyway, right? So, it's much harder. I was in Home Depot last week with my dad, and there was no salesman that came up and said, "Can I help you find something?" Couldn't find him. So you're starting to realize that you're not really getting all of that support and customer service that you used to get in the stores anyway, or the showrooms. And so why not just do it online?
That was the joke I heard earlier today. Somebody was asking about visiting a Home Depot and speaking to an employee, and the response was, "Oh, Home Depot has employees? Question mark, question mark, question mark." Based on past experience.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So,
all right.
And then get ready for digital trade shows. So I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but I've heard some talk about that. So, right. So, okay. So we're going to finish up here. This is our fifth and final webinar here. And so we just want to kind of recap and go back to where we started. And again, I think this advice that we presented here on the first webinar is just as relevant here now, 5 weeks later. Again, remember, stay informed, but don't watch the news. Even more so now, I feel like the news is they're starting to grab for straws. They try to get anything as spectacular as possible, and they can't, put any kind of a death count or anything like that without including words like tragic or catastrophic or stunning. And it's just, I think it's just gotten really to the point where they're trying to make this thing a lot worse than it is. So be informed, absolutely. Read some articles, but don't sit down and binge watch and turn on the television and watch the news, because That's not going to get you informed. That's only going to get you anxious. Second, connect with your peers. Do what you're doing here. Watch webinars. Go and attend your Zoom calls that hopefully your Builder 20 or Remodelers Advantage groups are doing. Connect with other people in your industry. Pick up the phone. Connect with us. Feel free to contact us, but stay connected with your peers. Next, be optimistic about the long term. I love the quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer. He says, no one knows enough to be a pessimist. And definitely in the case of this pandemic, we don't know enough yet to be able to know. So when you have the choice, be optimistic about the long term, but focus on those short-term solutions. A few weeks back, David talked about how important it is that when you get into your office the next day, you focus on what can I do today? What can I control? What can I do today, this week? Because that's about all that you can do at this point.
Actually, you might convey Jose's how he turned that around, because that was a really good story this morning from a real client, right?
Yeah.
Where
right,
he said
exactly.
in the beginning, the things started falling apart, and it was a couple of his employees had the coronavirus. He happens to be in New Orleans, and things are totally falling apart. It was an entire mess, and his company was sort of going down, down, down. So he made the decision, we're going to stay in business. We're going to be here. We're going to hire people. It's going to happen, and we're going to make it happen. Well, when he made that decision, everything started to turn around. And literally a week or two later, he's sitting with $1 million in cash because a bunch of loans got funded. He has great employees. He's got all this work lined up, and his business has never looked better than it does right now. And that happened in 2 weeks.
Yep. Exactly.
So, and that's leadership, Paul, isn't it? I mean, basically,
yep.
He's saying, we're getting through this. Let's pull everything together. But he led that. He made that happen.
Right.
Exactly right. Yep.
We have got a neat note from Mike Miller, piggybacking on what you said, Ed. Yes. You mentioned FaceTime with your parents. I found and use Alexa with my mother in assisted living. You just need a Wi-Fi in your parents' place and an Alexa app on your phone, and you can drop in on your parents. Works great. They don't have to do anything.
Wow. Thanks, Mike. That is a great suggestion. Awesome. All right. Well, that's good. Very good to know. Yep. And then the last thing too, and I think I can apply this to my parents as well. Be selective as to who you share your concerns with, right? My wife is in my business, so she knows intimately what's going on. We talk about business stuff all the time. It's important to keep her involved. But do I talk to my mom or my dad about those things? No. So be selective as to who you share your concerns with, because some people, and particularly also applies to your employees, right? All of us are experiencing periods of anxiety and panic and uncertainty, but you don't share that with your employees.
I have a story. One of my clients I talked to, and he was getting to the point we realized that he doesn't feel supported by anybody because his employees are all concerned, the architects are upset with him, the clients are upset with him, and his kids. I mean, everybody is sort of like upset with him, and this has just accelerated everything. And he's going, I don't want to do this anymore. And if you look at the statistics, 9 out of 10 small businesses fail. And they usually fail for only one reason, that the owner is not getting the emotional or financial compensation they think they deserve for the effort they're putting in, and they quit. Well, I will tell you, this situation is going to put a lot of people over the edge. They're going to go, it's just not worth it. And if they were on the edge before and not getting any support, they're in trouble. So create a support group. Create people that appreciate what you do and thank you for what you do. And make sure you've got that support group, or you probably won't last because you can't be the only positive person among everybody you know.
Great point. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, that brings us to the end of this webinar and the end of our 5-part series. We do want to let you know that we have weekly group coaching sessions that we are offering on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific and 12 noon Eastern. If you are interested in wanting to continue to stay in contact with us, we invite you to go and sign up for our free group coaching sessions. You can do that by going on to our website, which is Residential Contractor Services Group. Or if you don't want to type all of that in, you can just type in www.rcsg.org, rcsg.org, and then go to the business coaching, and you can sign up for the free weekly coaching session. So, and if you have any questions, again, please don't hesitate to call us or email us. I'm going to put up our phone numbers and our email addresses one more time for any of you that are interested or have any kinds of questions or anything at all, even if it's just you need a little pep talk. We're great at that. We've been doing quite a bit of that lately as well. So please feel free to, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David.
Thank you for joining us for these 5 weeks. Let Nicole, let Harvey know if you appreciated this. We do these things, you know, I think we're going to continue our Friday briefings, correct? And the subject matter will change because, you know, this market is changing. But the reality is, between the three of us, we're speaking with contractors around the country on a weekly basis. And we're really beginning to see what the successful contractors are doing. So, you know, join the coaching group. See if you want to join us on Friday for the pandemic briefing. Well, is it a pandemic briefing or is it the briefing about the future? I think we're still retitling this because where do we go? What will good companies do? So please, if you want to know more about that Friday briefing, let any one of us know, and we can send you the registration link for that. So everybody, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. If we can do anything for you, please let us know. All right. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Afternoon.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.